London, they know the truth, and we must stand vigilant. Providing this increased funding for our surface transportation inspectors is a wise investment on behalf of the American people, and I ask my colleagues to support this amendment.
Gentlewoman yields back the balance of her time.
I yield back at this time.
Does the gentleman from Alabama, the chairman of the subcommittee, seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I withdraw my reservation, but I rise in opposition.
The gentleman withdraws his reservation. The gentleman rises in opposition to the amendment and is recognized for 5 minutes.
The bill already reduces the Office of Undersecretary substantially, 6% below the request and 26% below the FY11 CR, reflecting the fact that the bill includes no funding to continue construction of the Department of Homeland Security headquarters. The bill has reduced management to a bare minimum, with a reduction of 29% to leadership and management offices. The Department of Homeland Security is an agency of 230,000 employees. The number of employees in OSEM is 700, or less than 1/3%. And funding provided is also 1/3% for the total DHS budget. This is extremely small for assets need to manage a major security department. Additional reductions would prevent filling key staffing positions and thus limit the ability of the department to respond to national emergencies and provide stable leadership to the public and the nation in the event of a large disaster or terrorist event. These reductions are not compatible with running a cabinet agency. No other federal department is asked to manage such large responsibilities and operating components with such a small and stretched headquarters element. Therefore, I urge the members to oppose this amendment.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Texas. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last words.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
And would like to yield to my colleague from Texas so that she can respond to the last speaker.
The gentleman is recognized. And the gentleman must remain on his feet as he controls the time, and the gentlewoman is recognized.
I thank the ranking member, and I think it's important I listen to the gentleman, Mr. Adderholt, list a lot of numerical and factual points about personnel. Let me be very clear. As Senator Lieberman said, all of our systems need to be on high alert, and all of our citizens need to be on high alert as we approach the 10th anniversary of 9/11. It is clear, Mr. Chairman, and to my colleagues, that something is awry with al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is interested in transportation modes, and they're interested in our rail systems. They have already done Mumbai. They have done London, and they have done Madrid. And therefore, they are looking at the United States. No, we don't have Pacifics, but we do have the potential of our rail lines crossing America being ripe targets for al-Qaeda. This is a very small amount that would allow us to have surface inspectors who are truly crucial to the protection of the nation's mass transit, freight, and long-distance rail. Every state is impacted, from New Hampshire to Florida, to the Midwest, to the West. Texas, Houston, has as its city insignia a rail. Why? Because trains crisscross our community. And therefore, I think it behooves us to be bipartisan and to actually support an amendment that provides a cushion of protection and a cushion and an armor, if you will, against the thoughts and the mindsets of al-Qaeda. Yes, they are franchised, they are splintered, but that makes it all the easier for them to find their way here to the United States. I remind my colleagues that prevention is worth a pound of cure. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I ask my colleagues to consider the small investment it would take to be able to secure the nation's railways. And as a member of the Homeland Security Committee, the authorizing committee, I can assure you that we are seeing these kinds of threats in terms of the vastness of our system, and we need to be able to protect our system. I ask my colleagues to support this amendment. Yield back to the gentleman.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Texas. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. The clerk will read. For what purpose the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Mr.
Amendment
Speaker,
offered by Mr. Brown of Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous.
For what purpose the gentleman rise?
I ask unanimous consent that the dispense with the reading and consider it
without
as if it's
objection.
read.
The amendment will be considered as having been read. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to offer my amendment to H.R. 2017. My amendment simply cuts $600,000 from the Office of the Undersecretary in the Department of Homeland Security and places those funds in the deficit reduction account. During this economic emergency, we must find cuts wherever we can, especially when a department is not being a good steward of the funding that Congress provides it. If you look at this bill, the Secretary is being allocated nearly $127 million, of which $6 million goes to the Office of Legislative Affairs. I think the American people would agree with me that $6 million is a lot of money for political appointees who refuse to do their job and participate in the oversight process. On several occasions this year, Mr. Speaker, the Department has either refused to sit on the same panel as other witnesses or has outright refused to appear before various House committees and subcommittees. In fact, as Chairman of the House Science Subcommittee on Investigations and Oversight, I held a hearing on behavioral science and security with the goal of understanding how science informed the development of TSA's SPOT program. The Department refused my request for a witness from TSA for their own program. And I'm not the only chairman who has received such shabby and unacceptable treatment. This pattern of arrogance makes fulfilling our oversight responsibilities of the executive branch very difficult, if not impossible. In the end, it's the American people, Mr. Speaker, who lose if its government cannot perform its most basic constitutional responsibilities. If the Department is not going to meet its obligations of appearing before Congress when requested, it is prudent to apply the funds rescinded in this, my amendment, to more constructive uses, such as reducing our deficit. If 10% is good enough for the Lord, I think the Office of Legislative Affairs can part with 10% of their funding to aid in our efforts of reducing the burden of our debt on our children and grandchildren. I can think of no higher priority than reducing the deficit and creating jobs in America. And I would urge all of my colleagues to support this amendment today. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose the gentleman from North Carolina rise? For what purpose the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Mr. Chairman, we accept the gentleman from Georgia's amendment.
The gentleman's recognized. For what purpose the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
I will not go on at length, but I simply don't believe the case has been made for a further reduction. The suspicious passenger, the observation techniques programs that have been cited aren't even under the jurisdiction of the Undersecretary being cut, and the bill already cuts $4,993,000 off of the fiscal 2011 level for the Undersecretary for Management, and it cuts $14,118,000 off of the administration's request. Now, Mr. Chairman, I know this is an easy target. Who knows even what the Undersecretary for Management does? It's a very common technique around here to go after these accounts, these administrative and front office accounts, just for the sake of cutting, or maybe to pay for something else that sounds good. But I don't think it's wise. I don't think it's responsible, and I would urge rejection of the amendment.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Georgia. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Amendment at the desk.
Will the gentleman specify which of his two amendments in this paragraph he wishes to have considered?
The original number is 124.
Amendment number 124. Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 8, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Poe of Texas.
Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
I want to thank the chairman. This amendment takes $10 million from the Office of the Undersecretary of Management of DHS and moves it to the Border Security, Fencing, Infrastructure, and Technology account with the purpose of being used for border cell phone communications to help border residents disseminate border security-related information to Border Patrol and law enforcement for the protection of their lives and their border. I appreciate the support of Congressman Altmaier from Pennsylvania in this bipartisan amendment. This amendment really is the idea of Congresswoman Gabby Giffords from Arizona. After having been to the border of Arizona with her staff, I learned firsthand the problems that not only Texas and other states, but Arizona specifically have with communication when ranchers are on their property. On March 27, 2010, rancher Bob Krantz of Arizona was murdered 20 miles north of the border from Mexico in an isolated area of Arizona. The lack of communications capability made Krantz more vulnerable than he would have been otherwise and complicated the search for the assailants. His wife believes that it was in a cell phone dead zone where he was killed and that he was trying to call for help, but his cell phone would not work. Since that time, Congressman Giffords has been working diligently on this issue, and I have had the opportunity to work with her on other border security issues as well as this one. These dead zones are so common that oftentimes border ranchers in Arizona and Texas rely on shortwave radios to communicate and call for help when they are in trouble or they see illegal crossings into their property. The inability of the U.S. government to secure the U.S.-Mexico border creates public safety hazards for residents of border areas and the law enforcement agents who patrol them. Many border areas are rural and lack wireless communication capabilities like phone service, and they exacerbate the border-related public safety concern. Once again, I want to thank Congresswoman Giffords and her staff for this legislation. I yield how much time he wishes to spend to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Altmaier.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Gentleman from Texas, and we are joining in the office of Congresswoman Giffords in offering this amendment. I had the opportunity last week to travel to Congresswoman Giffords' district in the 114-mile border that she has along the Mexican border and her district. And when you see, as my colleague from Texas knows, these ranchers and the territory that they have to cover, and we have a national community campaign now, if you see something, say something. Well, these are areas where you don't have the communications. Even if you see something, there's no one to tell. There's no way to get that message out. So what the gentleman from Texas is trying to do with this amendment is make sure that the equipment is there so that these ranchers and community citizens, if they see somebody coming across the border, if they see something that is alarming to them, they're able to communicate it. Right now, that technology does not exist. They are literally in the dark as far as communicating it. There is a public safety aspect to this amendment, and there is a Border Patrol aspect, the ability of our law enforcement personnel to communicate with each other and communicate with the local citizens who in some cases are out miles and miles away from any form of mobile communication. So I strongly support this amendment. I thank the gentleman from Texas for his leadership in offering it, and I thank Congresswoman Giffords and her office for leading the charge on this very important technology, and I would yield back to the gentleman from Texas.
The gentleman yield back the balance of his time.
I would like to close, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman is recognized.
This money is necessary so that people who live on border areas can communicate with law enforcement. Cell phone service is a basic necessity for security. It is a national security issue. It is a homeland security issue, and it is a border security issue. I urge adoption of this amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose, the gentleman from Alabama, the chairman of the subcommittee, rise?
Mr. Chairman, I reluctantly rise to oppose the amendment.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Again, this proposal would further create cuts to the Department's management functions below what is responsible for our nation's security. The committee has already cut the Department's headquarters and management historic levels. As I had mentioned earlier, they includes the zeroing out of the funding for the Department's new headquarters. It zeroes out funding for the data center migration. It slashes other initiatives we cannot afford at this time. The Department must still have robust funding to manage the many organizations under its authority. The Department was created from nearly 24 agencies and still faces challenges in achieving the unified Homeland Security enterprise. More importantly, the gentleman's amendment proposes that the Department pay for cell towers to provide phone services to the general public. I'm very sympathetic to the needs of rural communities. I'm from a rural community. And certainly I'm sympathetic to remote ranchers as well. But this is not a cost that the Homeland Security can bear at this time, especially under the constraints that we have. Therefore, I urge my colleagues to oppose the amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The balance of his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion chair, the noes have it. The
Mr. Chairman.
Noes have it. Gentleman from Texas.
Ask for the yeas and nays.
Clause 6 of Rule 18 for the proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas will be postponed. Okay. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Eleanor Holmes Norton, rise?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to offer an amendment to restore funding for
the clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Ms. Norton of the District of Columbia. Page 3, line 19, after the period, insert in addition for necessary expenses.
Mr. Speaker, I ask permission to waive the reading of the amendment.
Without objection, the amendment will consider as having been read. For what purpose the gentleman from Alabama rise?
I reserve a point of order on the gentlelady's amendment.
The gentleman reserves a point of order. The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, this amendment would restore $500,673 to the Department of Homeland Security that has been cut entirely from this appropriation. This is the most important construction, private or public, ongoing in our country today because it involves a secure facility that the Congress has voted to consolidate in order to protect the United States of America on the mainland. This entire appropriation cuts millions of dollars or billions of dollars in order to reduce spending. I wager that there is no cut quite like this one, because this cut guarantees that the taxpayers will be charged more precisely because of this cut. Already, the reduction in funding to the 2011 appropriation for consolidation of the Department of Homeland Security has cost taxpayers $69 million. Costs for construction of federal property come from, in this case, lease holdovers, short-term extensions, further and horrific inefficiencies now imposed because the integration of construction of this mammoth facility will be delayed and interrupted. Any further reduction in funding will substantially increase even more the total cost of this huge project, the largest since the Pentagon's. Until now, it was on budget and on time. Remember why Congress voted to consolidate these 22 agencies in the first place. Congress has never formed an agency of one agency of 22 different agencies. They are spread all over this region, far and in between. That is why the Bush and the Obama administrations and the Congress have pursued a consistent program to consolidate critical elements of the Department of Homeland Security. These tenants now reside in the most expensive lease space in the United States, because that's what it is in this region, barring none, except perhaps New York City. The department spends hundreds of millions of dollars on leases throughout the entire region. The rapid consolidation of the Department of Homeland Security now underway will save billions, that's billions, in real estate costs, in addition to directing lease revenue to the GSA Federal Building Fund, which instead of using taxpayer dollars, appropriated dollars, uses agency rental payments to fund the construction and maintenance of federal real estate, portfolio, giving taxpayers added savings. Currently, the DHS is scheduled for full occupation by 2017. Every day of delay costs the taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is no way to do cutting. You don't cut what then costs you more in the short term and in the long term. The significant progress has already been made. 45% of the construction is complete. The Department of Homeland Security headquarters is a security plant. The Coast Guard headquarters. You just don't interrupt a massive complex building like this unless you want to spend more money than was anticipated. The timing of this amendment is critical to ensure that the project does not increase costs further. The continued dispersal of vital elements of this critically important department necessary for our security undermines the DHS mission itself by impeding its operations here and throughout the country. As ranking member of the subcommittee with jurisdiction over the GSA and this project, and part of it's funded out of this appropriation, shows we need quickly to fund this project.
For what purpose does the chairman of the subcommittee rise?
Does the gentlelady withdraw her amendment?
I'm sorry?
Yes. Unless there's somebody who wants to speak on my amendment, I am prepared to withdraw it.
The gentlewoman has withdrawn her amendment.
Unless someone is going to speak on it.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to briefly address the amendment.
Gentlemen,
Distract the last words.
Does the gentleman from Alabama continue to reserve a point of order against the amendment offered by the gentleman?
We continue to reserve.
Gentleman continues to reserve his point of order. The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to commend our colleague from the District of Columbia for her persistent advocacy for this headquarters consolidation and construction, and also for the history she's recounted for us today. I think it's time well spent to understand how both the Bush and Obama administrations and the Subcommittee on Homeland Security Appropriations through both the parties' leadership have until now supported this project. The bill before us, however, provides no funding for the new DHS headquarters or for the consolidation of leased property in 2012. That's a penny-wise and pound-foolish decision. Already, based on the delay in finalizing the 2011 bill and the reduced resources provided in that bill for DHS headquarters construction activities, the cost of the headquarters project has grown. It's grown by $200 million, from a total cost of $3.4 billion to $3.6 billion. The decision to deny an additional $159.6 million in 2012 to finalize construction of the first phase of the new headquarters project and to begin construction on the second phase will result in yet higher costs in the out years and will delay by at least 2 years when the Coast Guard can move into its new headquarters facility, which is already under construction. Similarly, the bill doesn't provide $55.6 million requested for lease consolidation activities. Last year, this subcommittee held a very informative hearing with DHS and the General Services Administration on this activity. We heard testimony about the significant financial benefits of reducing the number of leases DHS has from 70 buildings across 46 locations in the greater D.C. area to 6 to 8 buildings. Witnesses testified that this massive footprint disrupts the effectiveness and the cohesiveness of departmental operations and adds needless layers of cost and complexities to facilities management. Additionally, the leases will consume an increasingly larger share of the department's budget through overhead costs in the coming years. In a time of fiscal constraint, the department will not have extra dollars to pay for all of these lease increases without shortchanging frontline and mission-essential programs. So, Mr. Chairman, at a time when real estate prices continue to be low in the greater Washington, D.C. area, and construction and material costs are relatively low as well, this is the time to make this kind of investment. Funding this activity would save taxpayers money for years to come. With that, I again commend the gentlewoman for her passionate and effective argument on this point, and yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Does the gentleman from Alabama continue to reserve his point of order?
We continue to reserve.
Gentlewoman from the District of Columbia.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I withdraw my amendment.
Gentlewoman withdraws her amendment. Without objection, the amendment of the gentleman from the District of Columbia is withdrawn. For what purpose, gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, rise?
Amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 7, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. Poe of Texas.
Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment. Mr. Chairman. Purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order on the gentleman's amendment.
Gentleman reserves a point of order. Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill has to do with enough housing for people who are illegally in this country in order to be detained and deported back to where they came from. This past Sunday morning in Houston, Texas, police officer Kevin Will was on patrol. He was working an accident scene, talking to a witness at that accident scene when a person comes barreling through the police barricade in spite of the warning lights that were on top of the police cruisers. When Kevin Will saw that the car was coming toward him, he told this witness to jump out of the way. The witness jumps out of the way, and this individual runs over and kills Officer Kevin Will. He was charged with evading arrest, he was charged with possession of cocaine, and he was charged with intoxication manslaughter of a police officer, and he was in this country illegally. He had previously been deported twice. The district attorney's office says that this individual is a member of the MS-13 gang, and now he's still in the United States committing crimes. There are not enough places to house these people like this criminal after they serve their time and house them so that they can be deported back where they came from. What this bill does is allocate more money for detention beds so that we can detain these people while we are waiting to deport them back where they came from, so that we can have a safer community so that these people aren't running loose somewhere in the United States. I would like to yield as much time as he wishes to consume to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Culberson.
Thank you. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of this amendment, and I thank the chairman of the subcommittee and the very capable staff in putting strong language in the bill, encouraging the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Office to fill as many beds as possible. We've given the agency an unprecedented amount of money and leeway and guidance in this bill to fill every available bed, public, private, county, state bed, with individuals that cross the border illegally, with individuals released from county and state prisons that are supposed to be deported criminally. The solution to the problem of illegals crossing the border, the guns, the gangs, the drugs, the crime, is not complicated. It's called law enforcement. We want to force existing law with the support of the local community we have very strong support from the communities on the border, and in fact we are enforcing existing law, which is 6 months in jail if you cross the border illegally, with great success in the Del Rio sector, and it's being rolled out in the Laredo sector. And we are working together with my good friend, my colleague Henry Cuellar, Ted Poe and I, with the support of the local community, the local prosecutors, the Border Patrol, the prosecutors, with great success. And if I could, I would like to yield briefly to my friend Mr. Cuellar to talk about the success
The
of
gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, controls the time.
You yield back to me.
I yield back.
I yield as much time as he wishes to consume to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cuellar.
The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cuellar, is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both of my colleagues from Texas. It's a program that does work. We've sat down, we've gone to Laredo, we've seen it work in the Del Rio area. We're now working in Laredo. In fact, the last time we sat with Chief Harris, we talked about how we can make this work. They do need some space, so I certainly want to work with both of my colleagues to make sure that we get more of that space, more of the beds, to make sure it works. All we're doing is enforcing a 1954 law that's on the books already. Nothing new except enforcing the law, and certainly I support with what you're doing. I yield back the balance of my time.
I would urge this amendment to be adopted. What it does is provide more space so that we can detain people and deport them back where they came from. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
No, the amendment proposes to amend portions of the bill not yet read.
Does the gentleman raise a point of order? I reserved a point of order.
I insist point of order.
Gentleman insists on his point of order. Will the gentleman state his point of order?
Mr. Chairman, the amendment process to amend the portion of the bill not yet read, the amendment may not be considered en bloc under Clause 2F of Rule 21 because the amendment proposes to increase the level of outlays in the bill. And I ask a ruling from the Chair.
Does anyone wish to be heard in opposition to the point of order? If not, the Chair is prepared to rule. To be considered en bloc pursuant to Clause 2F of Rule 21, an amendment must not propose to increase the levels of budget authority or outlays in the bill. Because the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas proposes a net increase in the level of outlays in the bill, as argued by the chairman of the subcommittee, it may not avail itself of Clause 2F to address portions of the bill not yet read. Point of order is sustained. For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise? For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise? Does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition? Does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition? For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk, number 11.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. McCall of Texas, page 3, line 9. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $50 million. Page 7, line 13.
Dispense with the reading.
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as having been read. For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Mr. Chairman.
I reserve a point of order for the gentleman's amendment.
Reserves a point of order.
Mr. Chairman, we've not seen the amendment.
Is the gentleman objecting to the unanimous consent request propounded by the gentleman from Texas that the amendment be considered as having been read?
Yes, I am. We have not seen the amendment.
We'll continue to read the amendment.
Page 7, line 13. After the first dollar amount, insert increased by $50 million. Page 7, line 21. After the dollar amount, insert increased by $50 million.
The gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition. The gentleman from Alabama continues to reserve a point of order.
I continue to reserve.
And the gentleman from Texas is recognized in support of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment will increase funding by $50 million for Customs and Border Protection Air and Marine operations. It will include funding for at least 2 UAV systems, as well as much-needed helicopters and marine vessels to assist CBP operations along the border. This amendment will provide the resources to increase the number of flight crews, training, ground operations needed to support the mounting requests for aerial surveillance missions and boat crews to patrol the rivers and lakes along our border. CBP Air and Marine support supplements our agents on the ground, allowing CBP to deploy fewer agents in a specific area. CBP Air and Marine currently operates 7 UAVs and intend to grow the fleet to a total of 18 to 24 by 2016. I have seen the benefits of these missions personally, along with my good friend and colleague from the Homeland Security Committee, Mr. Cuellar, who I yield as much time as he may consume.
Thank you very much to my good friend from Texas. And I want to thank the chairman and the ranking members for everything they've done for border security. We really appreciate it. We just feel that we ought to put a little bit of money to have the OM and, of course, the UAVs. We've gone down to Corpus. We've been there with General Kostanek, which I think is doing a great job. And what they do is they provide eyes on the sky. Flying at 19,000 feet, they can see what's happening, and it provides the intelligence to the state, federal, local, and certainly it's something that I support. And again, I want to thank you again to my friend McCall for the work that you've done on this particular amendment. Thank you. Yield back the balance of my time.
Yield back the balance of his time.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I reserve my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Alabama continue to reserve his point of order.
I insist upon my point of order.
Point of order. The gentleman will state the point of order.
Mr. Chairman, the amendment proposes to amend portions of the bill not yet read. The amendment may not be considered to be en bloc under Clause 2F of Rule 21 because of outlays in the bill. I ask for a ruling from the chair.
Any member wish to be recognized in opposition to the point of order? If not, the chair is prepared to rule. Similar to the last ruling, to be considered an unblocked pursuant to Clause 2F of Rule 21, an amendment must not propose to increase the levels of budget authority or outlays in the bill. Because the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas proposes a net increase in the level of outlays in the bill, as argued by the chairman of the subcommittee, it may not avail itself of Clause 2F to address portions of the bill not yet read. The gentleman from Texas have additional amendments?
I do, Mr. Chairman. I have amendment at the desk number 12.
The clerk will report the amendment of the gentleman from Texas.
Amendment offered by Mr. McCall of Texas, page 3, line 9. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $10 million. Page 45, line 18. After the dollar amount, insert increased by $10 million. Page 47, line 10, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $10 million.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order on the gentleman's amendment.
The gentleman reserves a point of order. Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment will increase funding for Operation Stone Garden by $10 million. And while the underlying bill increases funding from $50 to $55 million, it is not enough. Operation Stone Garden is a grant program that provides funding to county-level governments along the border to prevent, protect against, and respond to border security issues, as well as enhance cooperation and coordination between federal, state, and local agencies. At the last House Homeland Security Emergency Communications Preparedness and Response Subcommittee hearing, Sheriff Gonzalez of Zapata County and Sheriff Larry Deaver of Arizona explained the need for drastic increases in this funding. While $55 million is woefully inadequate when spread around, I believe that an additional $10 million would advance the cause. And with that, I yield again to my good friend from Texas, Mr. Cuellar.
One from Texas is recognized.
Thank you very much. Again, I want to thank a gentleman from Texas. I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for the work that they've done for border security. Again, we just feel, both Mr. McCall and I feel that we ought to add a little bit more help to the local sheriffs and the police that get this assistance. One of the things that we've seen is, of course, making sure that we don't have that spillover coming in from the Republic of Mexico. And by giving this assistance, whether it's the sheriff down there in Brownsville or going all the way up to El Paso, it's something that's needed, and I certainly support my friend to make sure that we increase the funding for Stone Garden by the amount that he's asked for. Again, thank you for your leadership, and again, thank you to the chairman and the ranking member for the work that they've done on border security. I yield back the balance of my time.
Does the gentleman yield back the balance of his time?
Yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Texas yields the balance of his time. For what purpose, gentleman from Alabama rise?
Mr. Chairman, the amendment proposes.
Gentleman,
Insists
gentleman
on a
insists
point
on
of
his
order.
point of order. Gentleman will state his point of order.
The amendment may not be considered in block under Clause 2F of Rule 21 because the amendment proposes to increase the level of outlays in the bill. I ask for a ruling from the chair.
Any member seeking to speak in opposition to the point of order? Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Just a question from my good friend from Alabama. It's my understanding that these monies are actually offset by the Undersecretary of Management's office. There's not an increased outlay.
Does the gentleman from Alabama wish to be heard further?
The amendment proposes to increase the level
recognized.
of outlays in the bill. I insist on my point of order.
Gentleman insists on his point of order. Anyone else seek to be heard on the point of order? If not, the chair is prepared to rule. For the reasons stated by the chair in the previous ruling, the amendment may not avail itself of Clause 2F of Rule 21 to address portions of the bill not yet read. The point of order is sustained. For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise? Gentleman from Texas have further amendments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to desk number 14.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. McCall of Texas, page 3, line 9. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $10 million. Page 16, line 24. After the dollar amount, insert increased by $10 million.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order on the gentleman's amendment.
Gentleman reserves a point of order. Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment will increase funding for Immigration and Customs Enforcement salaries and expenses in order to increase the number of Border Enforcement Security Task Force teams. I, along with Mr. Cuellar, have been down to the border and seen the direct benefits of the best teams in terms of interdicting the southbound flow of cash and weapons. It's my sincere hope that with additional resources, we can stop the flow of weapons going south into Mexico, but also seize the cash and asset forfeiture money that could then, in turn, help pay for our border security operations. And with that, I yield to my good friend from Texas, Mr. Cuellar.
Again, I want to
recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I want to thank my colleague from Texas, and again, I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for all the work that they've done for border security. The BEST program is a program that works. Basically, what it does is it coordinates state, federal, local, and also our international partners, both Canadians and Mexicans, to work together to make sure that they're able to focus on the same thing, and that is fight transnational crime. It's an idea that worked very well. In fact, they got started in Laredo, Texas. It's expanded now to both the northern and the southern part of the United States, and I certainly support my friend to make sure that we work and make sure that the BEST program gets stronger. And with that, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Does the gentleman from Texas
Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Does the gentleman from Alabama insist on his point of order?
Yes, we insist on point of order.
Insists on his point of order. Gentleman will state his point of order.
The amendment may not be considered in block under Clause 2F of Rule 21 because the amendment proposes to increase the level of outlays in the bill. I ask for a ruling from the chair.
Any member wish to speak in opposition to the point of order? If not, the chair is prepared to rule. For the reasons stated by the chair in the previous rulings, the amendment may not avail itself of Clause 2F of Rule 21 to address portions of the bill not yet read. The point of order is sustained. Gentlemen from Texas have additional amendments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk number 10.
The clerk will report amendment number 10.
Amendment offered by Mr. McCall of Texas, page 3, line 9. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $10 million. Page 7, line 13. After the first dollar amount, insert increased by $10 million. Page 12, line 6. After the dollar amount, insert increased by $10 million.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment will increase funding by $10 million for border security fencing, infrastructure, and technology. Secretary Napolitano's cancellation of the Secure Border initiative delays the deployment of technology to secure it.
Purpose does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
I reserve a point of order for the gentleman's amendment.
The gentleman's reservation is not timely. The gentleman from Texas has been recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The backbone of the new proposed system, integrated fixed towers, will not be in place until January of 2013. In place of SBI-Net, a new border surveillance technology plan has been developed that abandons the fixed sensor tower nature of the original SBI-Net plan and replaces it with multiple technologies. As a result, the new plan consists of a reduced number of sensor towers envisioned in the SBI-Net plan, and in their place, lower-cost technologies such as mounted radar and camera systems, portable and imaging systems, and thermal imaging devices. The Secretary said that technology will not be deployed to cover the entire southern border until the year 2025. I believe that is unacceptable. This amendment provides funding for readily available technology that we can deploy quickly to secure the border before that time frame. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Balance of his time. Any member seek time in opposition to the amendment?
Yes,
For what purpose does the gentleman
Mr.
from
Chairman,
Alabama rise?
I oppose because of breaching outlays.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, this will breach our outlays, and I oppose the amendment. And I reserve the.
Does the gentleman yield back the balance of his time?
Yes, sir.
Gentleman yields
Mr.
back
Chairman.
the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
Mr. Chairman, I simply want to back my chairman in this instance and also urge rejection of the amendment.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
No, Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. The gentleman from Texas seek recognition.
Just two more, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your patience. Number 13.
Amendment number 15?
13.
Amendment number 13. The clerk will designate amendment number 13. Amendment number 13. The clerk will designate amendment number 13 from the gentleman from Texas.
Amendment offered by Mr. McCall of Texas, page 3, line 9. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $10 million. Page 16, line 24. After the dollar amount, insert increased by $10 million. Page 18, line 23. After the dollar amount, insert increased by $10 million.
For what purpose, gentleman from Alabama rise?
I reserve a point of order on the gentleman's amendment.
Gentleman from Alabama reserves a point of order. The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment will increase funding for Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office of Detention and Removal. And while the underlying bill does increase funding by $26 million, we need more. This is a primary enforcement arm within ICE for identification, apprehension, and removal of illegal aliens from the United States. They're severely under-resourced, and DRO is overwhelmed, does not have the resources to do their job. ICE has stated repeatedly that they simply don't have the manpower and resources to deport illegal aliens, even criminal aliens identified through the 287G program. The federal government has this responsibility, and it needs to step up to the plate. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise?
I insist upon my point of order.
Gentleman will state his point of order.
Mr. Chairman, the amendment proposes to amend the portions of the bill not yet read. The amendment may not be considered en bloc under Clause 2F of Rule 21 because the amendment proposes to increase the level of outlays in the bill. I ask for a ruling from the chair.
Any member wishing to speak in opposition to the point of order? If not, the chair is prepared to rule. For the reasons stated by the chair in the previous rulings, the amendment may not avail itself of Clause 2F of Rule 21 to address portions of the bill not yet read. The point of order is sustained. For what purpose, the gentleman from Texas rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk number 15.
Amendment number 15. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. McCall of Texas, page 3, line 9. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $10 million. Page 16, line 24. After the dollar amount, insert increased by $10 million. Page 7, line 10. After the dollar amount, insert increased by $10 million.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama, the chairman of the subcommittee, rise?
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order on the gentleman's amendment.
Gentleman reserves a point of order. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall, is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment will nearly triple the amount of funding for the popular 287G program, which authorizes the Secretary of Homeland Security to permit specially trained state and local law enforcement officers to apprehend, investigate, or detain aliens during a time frame and under federal supervision by ICE. It is an important force multiplier for ICE in allowing for enhanced capabilities to detain and remove illegal aliens identified by local law enforcement during the course of their duties. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Does the gentleman from Alabama insist on his point of order?
I insist upon my point of order.
Gentleman will state the point of order.
The amendment may not be considered en bloc under Clause 2F of Rule 21 because the amendment proposes to increase the level of outlays in the bill. I ask for a ruling from the chair.
Any member wishing to be heard in opposition to the point of order of the chairman of the subcommittee? If not, the chair is prepared to rule. Once again, for the reasons stated by the chair in the previous rulings, the amendment may not avail itself of Clause 2F of Rule 21 to address portions of the bill not yet read. The point of order is sustained. Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cuellar, seek recognition.
We reserve.
Does the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cuellar, seek recognition?
Yes, I do.
Does the gentleman wish to offer an amendment?
Yes, I do. I have an amendment at the desk.
And the clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Cuellar of Texas, page 3, line 9, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $16 million. Page 14, line 22, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $32 million. Page 63, line 17, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $16 million.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama, the chairman of the subcommittee, rise?
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order on the gentleman's amendment.
Gentleman reserves a point of order. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cuellar, is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I want to thank the chairman and, of course, our ranking member, Mr. Price, for all the work that they've done for border security. This is an amendment similar to Mr. McCall that adds $32 million to the CPP Air, Marine, interdiction and operations and maintenance and procurement, and takes $60 million away from the Office of Undersecretary for Management, another $60 million from the Science and Technology Management Administration. Again, this is to purchase at least 2 additional UAVs and make sure that they have the operations and maintenance. And with that, I'll reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman may not reserve the balance of his time. The gentleman yield back the balance of his time?
Yield back the balance.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Alabama insists on his point of order.
I withdraw my reservation.
Gentleman,
but I oppose the amendment.
The reservation of the point of order is withdrawn, and the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes in opposition to the amendment of the gentleman from Texas. I said the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes in opposition to the amendment of the gentleman from Texas.
Yes, we oppose the amendment because it is within $30 million of the. We've already added $30 million for this request, above the request, and therefore we believe this is sufficient funding for this portion of the bill.
Does the gentleman yield back the balance of his time? Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina, the ranking member of the subcommittee, rise? The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to underscore what our chairman has said about the generous addition in this bill for this function. These offsets, again, are maybe easy for members for whom this looks like just an abstract front office expenditure, but in fact they carry real costs. I urge rejection of the amendment.
Does the gentleman yield back the balance of his time?
I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion chair, the noes have it. The noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask for a record vote?
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
I would ask for a record vote on this bill. I mean, this amendment.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas will be postponed. The clerk will read.
Page 3, line 20, Office of the Chief Financial Officer, $50,860,000. Office of the Chief Information Officer, $261,300,000, of which $155,800,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2014. Analysts and Operations, $344,368,000, of which $58,757,000 shall remain available until September 30th, 2013. Office of Inspector General, $124 million.
Clerk will suspend reading. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. An amendment by Mr. LaTourette of Ohio, an amendment by Mr. Cicilline of Rhode Island, an amendment number 2 by Mr. Royce of California, amendment number 8 by Mr. Poe of Texas, and an amendment by Mr. Cuellar of Texas. The Chair will reduce to 2 minutes of time for any electronic vote after the first vote in the series. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. LaTourette, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. Clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. LaTourette of Ohio.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
The House is voting now on amendments to the more than $42 billion Homeland Security spending bill. The legislation is being considered under what's called an open rule, which allows members to offer any germane amendment to the bill. So the debate on amendments is expected to go late tonight and into tomorrow. We spoke with a reporter for a little more.
Rob Margetta of Congressional Quarterly is with us. House Republicans have brought up the Homeland Security Appropriations bill as the first to come up since they got control of the House. What's in this bill, and does it hint at all about their priorities?
Well, it hints about their spending priorities, that they are serious about reducing government spending. And that the bill itself contains overall reductions to the department and some very specific cuts that even some Republicans, such as House Homeland Committee Chairman Peter King, aren't particularly happy about.
How do the spending levels in this budget compare with past budgets?
It's a 3% reduction overall, but when you look at discretionary spending, it's actually a 7% reduction, taking it down to $40.6 billion.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us what's in the bill? What are some of the key programs that are funded in it?
Well, the Homeland Security Department is the Transportation Security Administration, the Coast Guard, Secret Service, FEMA, Border Patrol are all lumped into that same department. Of the programs being funded, probably the issue that's going to get the most attention is the fact that the department provides a lot of annual money to states and localities in Homeland Security grant funding, and that's actually targeted for a pretty big cut in this bill.
The rule allows for unlimited germane amendments. Are there any worth a closer look?
Well, actually, the bill does contain a proposal to cut $2.1 billion from grants. That would reduce it to a total of $1 billion, and there are some people who are nervous about the way that the grants would be set up. They'd essentially be in one big pot with no clear indication of how specific grant programs would be funded. Republican Peter King and Democrat Nita Lowey, both of New York, have filed an amendment that would reverse that. So that's probably going to be one of the amendments that would receive a good deal of focus and debate.
Now, who's opposed to this legislation, and what can we expect to hear from them?
You know, because it's the Homeland Security Department has so many different levels to it and so many different components, who is opposed to it and who is in favor of it really does depend on what particular program you're looking at. You know, for example, for something like the Transportation Security Administration, there are a number of people who have concerns about things like the whole body scanners. There are also a number of people in favor of that. When you look at something like funding the Coast Guard, which is in a dire need of new ships, it can be a completely different set of people who are for spending a lot more and a completely different set of people who are against it.
When can we expect a vote on final passage?
You know, because it's an unlimited rule, it's kind of hard to hazard a guess at this point, honestly.
Rob Margetta of Congressional Quarterly, we thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is the first of 5 amendment votes. Members voting now on a measure that would increase funding for firefighter assistance grants and offset that by reducing spending for some Homeland Security Department administrative functions. Setting the day-to-day budgets of domestic agencies like the Homeland Security Department will run parallel to efforts to negotiate spending cuts as part of the effort to increase the government's ability to borrow, the so-called debt ceiling. House Republicans met with President Obama at the White House today about the negotiations on raising the debt ceiling, reducing the debt, and cutting spending. The Associated Press writes that GOP leaders complained to the president that he had not produced a detailed plan of spending cuts and accused him of playing politics over Medicare. Meanwhile, the White House said the president has in fact led on the issue and made clear that he has no intention of dropping the issue of Medicare program for seniors. We're going to get both perspectives during this vote. First, House Republicans, after meeting with the president, then part of the White House briefing.
Afternoon, everyone. We had, I think, very productive meeting with the President today. We appreciate the opportunity to be here at the President's request to have a conversation about jobs and the deficit and the debt that's facing our country. This morning I released a letter signed by 150 economists who agreed that if we're going to get serious about creating jobs in America, we've got to reduce some of the uncertainty. Some of that uncertainty is caused by the giant debt that's facing our country. And the fact that if we're going to raise the debt limit, the spending cut should exceed the increase in the debt limit. Otherwise, it'll serve to cost us jobs in our country. That's not what the American people want. We had a very frank conversation. I thought it was productive. I'm looking forward to more serious conversations about how we reduce the deficit and the debt and to get our economy going again and creating jobs.
Morning. Today's meeting gave us an opportunity to express some concerns that we have surrounding the current situation in the economy. You know, ADP issued a report today estimating that private sector job creation amounted to 38,000 new jobs in May, woefully short of the amount needed for us to see this economy get back on track and people get back to work. You know, I said to the President today, it's really important for us to focus on growth in this economy. And as we go through the discussions and trying to get the fiscal house in order surrounding the debt limit vote, very, very important for us to look at growth as part of the fix. We can bring the deficit down through added jobs, but we can also get people back to work. We know that our chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Dave Camp, is hard at work at putting together a tax reform plan. I asked the President, hopefully, that he will work with us to do so and to keep out of the discussions surrounding the debt limit and in the Biden talks any notion that we're going to increase taxes. It's counterintuitive to believe that you increase taxes on those individuals and entities you're expecting to create jobs.
It was a unique opportunity where the entire conference got to convey what they're listening to across America. The President laid out from a debt discussion, but from the conference he heard about jobs. He heard about unshackling the burden of regulation onto small business to get them working again, from Wisconsin to West Virginia to members across the way. What I heard from this president, that he wanted to sit down and find real cuts now. He said there needed to be entitlement reform, and we will work with him towards those ends to direct where we create new jobs, put us on a new path to pay off the budget on a balanced budget and pay down the debt as well.
I want to thank the President and the Speaker for bringing us together today for this important discussion. You know, every generation of Americans has been proud to pass on a better country to the next generation. And yet for a lot of Americans right now, there's a question in their gut as to whether or not our children and our grandchildren are going to have more opportunities. And the foundation that we lay for them is so important. And we can't take for granted that we're just going to continue to have that strong foundation from which opportunity and innovation and ingenuity take place. Our tax policy matters, our debt matters, our energy policy matters. And whether it was our vote last night on the debt ceiling or the conversation today with the President about job creation, we are committed to taking the steps necessary to ensure that that next generation has more opportunities.
Any day Republicans and Democrats are actually having a dialogue, this is a good day. What the President heard from Republican members of the House is that jobs are jobs number one. That is our job. And unfortunately, the greatest impediment we have to jobs today is a lack of confidence in the future. Republican House members were able to share with the President that the job creators in our district feel that the regulatory burden, much of it coming from the President's administration, creates a lack of confidence in the future. Tax policy that is not competitive, a tax burden that is too high, creates a lack of confidence. And then last but not least, a debt burden. The President heard from Republican members of the House that we know that the debt burden is going to lead to high taxes, which leads to low unemployment. Unfortunately, what we did not hear from the President is a specific plan of his to deal with the debt crisis that could actually be scored by the Congressional Budget Office. And we hope there's still an opportunity to work on the drivers of this debt that is costing us jobs, because Republicans know that until we have the confidence that we can solve this debt crisis by dealing with the drivers, our entitlement spending, that we're not going to get the kind of jobs that the American people want and demand.
Take a couple of questions.
Mr. Tanner, you mentioned the ADP report. Did the President have a response to that? Did he respond to your concerns?
Well, the President admitted that we've got to look at growing this economy. The discussion really focused on the philosophical difference on whether Washington should continue to pump money into the economy, or we should provide an incentive for entrepreneurs and small businesses to grow. So I think the President was well aware and admitted the fact that private sector job creation is not enough. He did mention that a lot of the losses were in the public sector. Again, our message is focus on growth in the private sector. That's how we're going to help bring down the deficit and get people back to work.
But the President talked about additional spending.
Well, the President talked about a need for us to continue to, quote-unquote, invest from Washington's standpoint. And to a lot of us, that's code for more Washington spending, something that we can't afford right now.
Chairman Ryan, did you say to the President, you don't have the lead and you haven't shown leadership? That sounds confrontational.
Not exactly what I said. It wasn't exactly what I said. I just said we got to take on this debt. And if we demagogue each other at the leadership level, then we're never going to take on our debt. We have a debt crisis coming. We want to deal with this. And if we want to grow jobs in the economy, we got to get our spending under control. We got to get our debt under control. And if we try to demagogue each other's attempts to do that, then we're not applying the kind of political leadership we need to get this economy growing and get this debt under control. That's basically what we were saying. No, not at all. I simply explained what our plan is, how it works. It's been misdescribed by the President and many others. And so we simply described to him precisely what it is we've been proposing so that he hears from us how our proposal works so that in the future he won't mischaracterize it.
And he said it was not a voucher plan?
He didn't mention one way or the other.
Mr. Cantor.
What was the point of this meeting today? Was it negotiating? Was it optics? Was it public relations? Was it
I think it was
substantive?
an opportunity for clearly our members to communicate directly with the President about our ideas about how to get the economy going again, how to create jobs, and our ideas about how we solve the debt problem that's facing our country. I've told the President one more time, this is the moment. This is the window of opportunity where we can deal with this on our terms. We can work together and solve this problem. We know what the problems are. Let's not kick the can down the road one more time. Now's the time to deal with it. Thanks, everybody.
Mr. Speaker, any discussion of the...
We heard from the Republicans after the meeting with President Obama. Now we'll see part of the White House briefing responding to those GOP comments about the meeting.
There are differences. There is no question that on the issue of Medicare, we have significant differences. And what the President has made clear is that he doesn't believe that we need to end Medicare as we know it, to dismantle the program as it currently exists in order to achieve significant deficit reduction. He believes that Congressman Ryan is the author of the plan and the members who voted for it are sincere in believing that they think it's the, that is a preferred solution. We simply disagree. And we don't think that's a matter of demagoguery. It's a matter of fundamental differences of opinion and a different assessment of the facts, and we think the facts in this case are on our side. And one of the reasons is that problems we have with it is that in order to achieve the reductions that they seek in the House Republican plan and to pay for the extensive tax cuts for the wealthy that that plan calls for, they need to do things to Medicare that aren't necessary. And it produces an unbalanced plan, puts too much of the burden of deficit reduction on the shoulders of seniors, of low-income children, and the disabled. And the President just feels that that's unacceptable. Yes?
What specifically did the President tell the Republicans about the debt limit? And the Republicans who came out of the meeting said it was discussed at the beginning of the meeting. It didn't necessarily take up a lot of time.
That's accurate. It did not take up much time at all. The President made clear that he believes that there is no margin here for in any way casting doubt on the possibility that the debt ceiling would be raised, that the effect of even suggesting that it won't happen could be highly negative and could have dire consequences for our economy and the global economy. But it is accurate to say that that was not a focus of the discussion.
And I understand that Secretary Geithner was in the meeting. I don't think he said anything. That's what I heard.
My understanding is that I know he was in the meeting. My understanding is the President did most of the talking for the White House, for the administration. And
Secretary Geithner is going to Capitol Hill tomorrow. Does that indicate that you're worried the message isn't getting across to Republicans about the debt limit?
I think it indicates how seriously we take this issue, and that the Treasury Secretary in particular can address the particulars and the substance of why it is so essential to raise the debt ceiling, the consequences of not doing it, and the impact it would have on global markets, on interest rates, on economic growth and job creation. So I think that we, as I do consistently from here and others do from other venues, need to simply reiterate the absolute necessity of making that vote and raising the debt ceiling so that we do not reverse the very important and substantial progress that's been made since we emerged from the worst recession since the Great Depression.
A number of Republicans, though, argue they're not unwilling to raise the debt limit. They agree that it needs to be raised, but that there needs to be an agreement on how to cut the debt. And they think it's unhelpful for the administration to keep saying it would be calamitous, that it would be better to focus on the cuts and how to get the debt down.
Well, what we've said is that we're doing both. And I think that the President's leadership on this is very clear. Not only did he lay out his plan and his vision for how to achieve $4 trillion in deficit reduction over 10 to 12 years, he then tasked the Vice President of the United States to lead these very serious and so far productive negotiations with Congress, with both parties in both houses, to achieve a compromise on significant deficit reduction. within the same time frame that we need to address the vote on raising the debt ceiling. I think that demonstrates his commitment to both necessities. What we have said all along is that it sends the wrong signal, and it would be a mistake to directly link, tie, or hold hostage one to the other because of the absolute necessity of raising the debt ceiling. It is not an option if you want to maintain full faith and credit of the United States and you don't want to send this economy back into recession. Yes, Jay.
Congressman Ryan, in the meeting today, according to attendees, and according to Ryan at the stakeout camera, made the point to the President that, as Ben mentioned, that demagoguing the Ryan plan for Medicare is not helpful to this process. And while I understand the President doesn't believe that he has done so, does he think that the Democratic Party has done so? Has he seen the ads showing a Paul Ryan lookalike pushing grandma off a cliff? Has he seen any of these ways Democrats are using the Ryan plan to win elections and score political points, and does he have any issue with that?
Well, I don't know what ads he may or may not have seen, Jake. What I will say is that the substantive differences over Medicare are real, and the facts about whatever you call the system that is in the House Republican proposal, premium support or privatization or voucherization of the program, it has the impact of shifting the cost burden for ever-growing medical costs onto beneficiaries in large numbers, $6,400 per senior. That's just an inescapable fact. And our argument is you don't need to do that. You can find savings in Medicare and entitlements, as the President has already, through the Affordable Care Act, and as he has proposed further in his future-oriented proposal. And you can get at waste, fraud, and abuse, and you can reduce the cost of medical care while still protecting our seniors. That's what he believes we have to do. And one of the fundamental problems, and I think why people around the country have reacted poorly to the Republican proposal, is that it not only eliminates or changes the Medicare program to the point where it is no longer the program we know and does not provide the guarantees that it used to, but it does so in part in order to fund tax cuts for wealthy Americans who have already benefited significantly in a time when the middle class and others have been squeezed so tightly. So those are that's an assessment of priorities.
Have you seen Grandma going over the cliff?
I haven't, no.
Is that claim? I understand that there is a philosophical, legitimate philosophical difference the President has.
The President fundamentally believes that it does not, that we need a bipartisan solution, that we need to work together and find common ground.
So does his party running ads showing Paul Ryan pushing grandma over a cliff help that bipartisan process?
I think that the decisions and the negotiations that will produce a result and demonstrate this President's commitment to significant deficit reduction, as well as Democrats in Congress and Republicans in Congress, occur here in Washington. And the fact is that we can achieve that in a way that the American people can feel that each side moved off its starting position, accepted that it wasn't going to get 100% of what it wanted, that no absolutist positions prevail in Washington. That's the nature of our system. And he feels that he has demonstrated his commitment to that, his commitment to taking positions that often are at odds with members of his own party repeatedly. And he's been willing to do that in the past, and he's willing to do that in the future because he's committed to finding solutions that work for the American people.
So should the Democratic Party stop running? But you haven't answered the question. You said that the President is conducting himself in an appropriate way, but you haven't addressed the question of whether or not his party is.
If you're asking if there's been a negative reaction to aspects of the Republican plan, I think it's because of the incontrovertible facts about what's in the plan. You know, and our opposition to those elements of the House Republican proposal we have not at all papered over. But we're not doing, we are interested in bipartisan compromise. This President has made that clear again and again, and he's he's walked the walk, not just talked the talk, when it comes to making those tough choices, and he's shown his willingness to do that.
Can I ask a question about Libya?
Yes, but then
The
let's
quick
move
question
on so
about Libya.
others get a chance.
Just the question is that there's a resolution being offered by Congressman Dennis Kucinich that would stop U.S. Military intervention in Libya, and there are House Democrat and House Republican leaders who are concerned that it actually could pass because there are enough House Republicans who are frustrated with the consultation process and with what's going on. Is the White House aware of this? Is the White House doing anything about it as a concern?
Well, we're obviously aware of what happens on Capitol Hill and are aware of this in particular, but as I've said before, we feel strongly that the President has acted in a way that is consistent with the War Powers Resolution. He looks forward to and would be happy with support, demonstrations of support by Congress, and similar to the Kerry McCain proposal that has been put forward. You know, we'll wait to see whatever action Congress takes. In the meantime, we welcome the announcement today by NATO that it will extend its mission in Libya for 90 days. We feel that mission has been successful thus far, and in its mandate of protecting Libyans from attacks by the Gaddafi regime, and we continue to participate in that mission. Dan.
I want to go back to the tone of the meeting today. Was it at times confrontational? Were there sharp exchanges, and were Republicans challenging the president for it?
I think it was a very frank discussion, Dan, but I would not say it was confrontational. In fact, I think it was productive, and while nobody hid from the fact that there are differences, that it was a useful conversation, and I think that's what I heard when I watched some of the Republican members go out to the stakeout after the meeting, and we agree with that. It doesn't mean we don't have differences, but it means that we can, or they can, as elected officials sent here by their constituents to represent them in Washington, can have conversations. If they're Republicans, they can have conversations with Democrats, and if they're Democrats, they can have conversations with Republicans. And out of that dialogue comes agreement. Not on every issue, but on substantial areas that can allow us to move forward. And I think that's what the American people expect out of us.
And beyond the fact that everyone was quite pleased that all sides are sitting down and talking, that there is this dialogue, was there any real movement? Beyond the starting point, as you pointed out.
Well, yeah, I think I was asked this before. This was not the forum with that many people in the room to put out proposals and spreadsheets and start negotiating details. That is happening in the negotiations led by the Vice President. But it was an excellent opportunity for the President to hear from House Republicans and for the House Republicans to hear from the President. And I think that is a useful exercise, almost on any occasion, but in particular on this occasion. Yes, sir.
House Speaker Boehner, as a matter of principle, has said that the cuts that are agreed to ought to be at least as big as the raising of the debt limit. Is that, just as a matter of pure principle, is that something the White House can go along?
I don't really have a reaction to that as a matter of principle. I think that the details of the size of a deficit reduction package are being worked out by the bipartisan group that is meeting with the Vice President, and I don't want to get ahead of them. And then I think the Treasury Secretary is our lead on what we think the debt ceiling vote should look like and the size of it. So I don't want to, and we think they are distinct and separate issues.
But I haven't heard any principle from the White House that would violate, right? This is just a question of where you fit it in.
Again, we understand that there is linkage in the sense that some members have insisted that there be deficit reduction. We agree with the sentiment that we need to seriously attack our deficits, but we also think it's an absolute necessity to raise the debt ceiling. And we, again, you're not going to hear us link them in that way because we think they should not be linked directly. We believe that we can take action, positive action on both within the same time period. But again, we're not going to link them directly in that way. Yes, Chip, sorry.
push on the need for revenues as part of this package?